Hello everyone, it's Sylvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel and welcome to awesome April, another big tarot and oracle haul, and why I don't feel bad about it. So the month of April has been quite busy for me, just as February had been busy and March had been busy. I was really trying to get stuff done, and then there was new stuff coming to my attention, and I had to do 3,000 things all at once. And obviously, as always, when you try to do everything at once, you don't have much time to focus, and some things unfortunately slipped. So what happens is that I think that May is going to be very busy for me as well. But what I wanted to show you is the really awesome tarot and oracle haul that I had during the month. I'm just going to show you the decks without any particular order. Certainly not an order of arrival, not an order of preference. It's just because there are so many of them, I just put them all on the side, and whichever comes first whenever I'm trying to fish them out will be on camera. So I'm just going to start with the Lorenzi tarot by Irene Lorenzi. She's Italian. This tarot has been published by US Games, and I think it's a recent publication, perhaps from last year or towards the end of last year. But as I've explained a couple of times, we don't get new decks from US Games in Australia. We have to wait sometimes even 6-7 months before they're actually available to us. This deck though is a massive surprise, I have to say. So I had seen it in one of my friends' channels or her Instagram page, and when I saw it, I remember that I had a look at it when it was, in the final stages of preparation, and I remember that I found it really interesting because they're very intuitive. The artwork is very important in this deck. So it reminds me a little bit of the concept behind the Mary L tarot, in the sense that it doesn't necessarily show you the traditional figures you would encounter in an RWS deck. However, some cards will definitely follow the traditional deck. Some other cards will be completely, I want to say random, in the sense that the choice of the subject is not following that system, but they're not necessarily random in the sense that they come out of a process. They're not just any images out of the blue. So what I did find interesting is the depth of all of these characters and figures, whether it's human characters or animal characters. You will see that there's a lot to these drawings that really asks and demands your attention. A lot of people have reached out to me saying that they don't necessarily vibe with this deck because they find that in some cases some of the images represented are a bit too out of the ordinary, to the point of being perhaps creepy. I have a lot of what can be considered creepy decks in my collection. I think that whenever we get a tarot deck, we always have a reaction to it. And when it's a visceral kind of reaction, when it's something that really brings up a lot of emotions, it means that there is a bond. Whether you feel or not comfortable with that bond, of course, is up to you. And that's how I feel like also in my case, many of these decks get rehomed, because we do not know what we're gonna get. Even though sometimes we can actually see the images on Instagram, or just a simple Google search can show us many of the images, you do not have the feel of the deck until you actually hold it in your own hands. I hope it makes sense. And so I think that this deck, when it came to me, I already knew about some of the images being quite intense, let's call it like that. But when I actually got the deck into my hands, I had a very strong reaction to it, and it was a bonding reaction. It was a reaction that made me feel like I could really get a lot out of this deck. Starting from that as a base, I did my process of getting to know my decks, which is something that maybe one day, if you're interested, I might share with you. And I looked at all of the cards, and you know, I just decide whether I like a card initially at a first skin gut reaction. There were a few cards I wasn't too sure about, and I saw that at the end of the day I was really enjoying the artwork. I still am, and I still think that it's a very interesting, very strong kind of deck. That is something that I don't think that can be denied, in the sense that you may or may not like this type of artwork, but no one can deny that it's a very strong deck. I believe this is going to be a very cherished deck in my collection because of many things that I've noticed started working with it. Now, I'm going to say something now, and it's going to be valid for all of the decks that I'm going to show you today. I have a huge backlog of decks that I haven't had the time to get into. What I always do whenever I do receive a new deck, I definitely have a look at the cards. I try perhaps a couple of readings. I definitely have a first look at the guidebook and see whether I can vibe with the deck or not. But I never do an actual walkthrough. I never do a deep dive. I do prefer to do deep dives in order. So whenever I receive a deck, I wait for, you know, having done a deep dive on every other deck that preceded that deck, in such a way that I go through all of them with exactly the same amount of time, which means that it takes me weeks to catch up with the decks that I've got, because I had a backlog in February, it just grew bigger in March, and April was even worse. And something else that I'm going to say, and you'll notice that it's probably on the title of this video. So this is awesome April. April has been absolutely awesome when it comes to you know, the orders that I received that were placed months ago. I received the Jonasa Jaus, for example, and so I'm really happy. Even the Wyrd of Sarah Howard came in April. However, there's also something that I wanted to say, and it's a message that I wanted to put out there for anyone that is going through some kind of doubt in their lives when it comes to tarot and collecting tarot. I am well aware that I get a lot of decks every month. I don't feel bad about it. Yes, it is a lot of decks. No, it does not constitute a problem for me. Whenever I receive a deck and I do not connect with it, I usually end up rehoming that deck after maybe a couple of times in which I have been going through the cards. This to me is a very important process of selection, in the sense that I consider a tarot deck a very important instrument for diving deep into the knowledge that we have of ourselves and the world. And if a deck doesn't work for me, I see no reason why it shouldn't go to someone else that will appreciate it more. So whilst I don't have any problem in decluttering, I don't necessarily do it very often, but I do it when I feel like I have to. I also don't have any problems in getting a lot of decks in every month. I don't feel bad. You know, having a tarot collection actually helped me through a lot of things in my life. I have been collecting for over 35 years now. And I'm still here, I'm still collecting. So it might mean that perhaps it's something that has become part of myself. And I don't feel like I have to berate myself because I'm buying a lot of decks. When it gets, if and when it will get to the point in which it will represent a problem, financially speaking, or even logistically, when it comes to how much room they take, then I will probably have a look at find a solution. But for now, I don't have either of those problems. Therefore, if buying a deck, if you find yourself in a situation in which you're doubting whether buying a deck, and you feel bad about it because you look around you, and there's the tendency nowadays to talk about low buying ear, no buying ear, you can of course go with that if that's what calls you. If you feel like you have to do that, if you feel like you'll come to a place in which you feel uncomfortable, absolutely go for it. But if you don't, if you actually enjoy buying decks and it doesn't represent any kind of problem for you, but you feel like you should stop, or maybe dial it back a little bit just because you feel other people and you see other people doing that, you do you. We're not all the same. Actually, as a matter of fact, I think we're all different, and that is why the world is beautiful, because of diversity. And diversity covers many aspects of life. And if you're like me, if tarot has helped you through stuff, collecting tarot, reading tarot, looking at tarot has helped you through stuff, then why not? I just wanted to put this out there. And I don't know whether this message resonates with you or not. I hope it does. But as I said, we're all different. So you do you, and that, whatever works for you is most likely the right thing to do. This was the Lorenzi Tarot. As I mentioned earlier, this month I received the Wyrd of Sarah Howard by Gabby Angus West. Gabby lives actually pretty close by. I mean, considering that I live in Australia, 600 kilometers is close by in Australia. And I think I was one of the first ones to receive this deck. This is the edition. It's a slightly different edition. If you're familiar with Sarah, so with the Wyrd of Sarah Howard, the oracle that was, I think it was published a few years ago. Now you can find it, but it sells for like $500-600 Australian dollars. So it's very difficult out of print and hard to find. The difference was that the previous edition had black borders, very similar to the borders that we have in the Bonfire Tarot, which is also by the same author. And it did have keywords instead of sentences. So I also think that the quality of the cardstock was slightly different. This is a very soft, very high quality linen finish. If you're familiar with the Yokai Yochi Tarot, it's a very similar finish to that tarot. I have to say the artwork is spectacular. So Gabby has been growing up close to a lake in the northern part of New South Wales, and this deck is an oracle deck which is basically dedicated to the lake. And I've heard a couple of people that live in the area, and this deck represents a kind of a nostalgic going back to the way in which they themselves lived at the contact with this lake in their lives. I have to be honest, I haven't really bonded with this deck, and the main reason is because of the sentences. So sentences rather than keywords. You'll see here, for example, this is the 5 of Hearts, and it says, and by the way, all of the cards have that reference to playing cards. So this one says as dry as a bone. And if we have a look, for example, what I notice, and I actually like it, it's the fact that in the guidebook, there are the keywords that were originally in the previous edition of this deck. So if the 5 of Heart, if we look, if we find the 5 of Heart in the guidebook, you will see that 5 of Hearts draft. And that was the original keyword that was on this card in your previous edition. Now, if you work better with keywords like I do, this is actually very helpful because you'll be able to memorize them after a while. As I said at the beginning of this video, I didn't really have any time to bond with any new deck yet, unless it was a very specific one like a Jonasa, for example. Because I simply don't have time to get into it. But I do want to eventually try and memorize all the keywords for the cards, because the sentences are just not working for me. They're beautiful sentences, don't get me wrong. I really enjoy that, but for one, they're actually written in white, and it's very kind of thin font, and in some cases it's white against white, so it's not as easy, let's say, to read. In some other cases, I don't know if I can find, well, they're long sentences, but in some other cases, I don't know if I can find one now, but there are cards where the sentence is actually written in a few ribbons on the card. I found this, and I think at this point I've been through almost all of the deck, and it's just one example. And the fact that it's split in three, I don't know, it feels like maybe just the keyword, a smaller keyword would have been better. And this is personal, it's just for me. As I said, I've seen very positive feedbacks about this deck in the tarot community, by people who actually did have the time to go into a deep dive. So I can't wait to actually do that as well. And the artwork is simply fantastic. It pairs really well with the Bonfire Tarot. And by the way, they did announce that there's going to be a reprint of the Bonfire Tarot, still mass market, with this type of linen card finish, which is, you know, it's very exciting. So this is the Wyrd of Sarah Howard. Another really small tiny deck that I just saw for like 10 bucks, and I thought, okay, well, why not? It's the Crystal Ball Pocket Oracle deck by Athena Noctua. It's just 13 cards, and it's got a tiny guidebook as well. And I think it's one of those decks that you really use whenever you have a very simple question and you want a very simple and very direct answer. Because as you can see, the keywords are exactly like that. So no, for example, not the right time, yes, unlikely, etc. This really you know, reminds me a little bit of the 8-ball, you know, the black 8-ball that you shook, and then there was a message coming in on one of the faces of the ball, let's say. This deck is so much fun. Unfortunately, I repeat myself, I know, but I haven't had the time to really use it yet. I do appreciate the fact that it's a papery, sturdy cardstock. If it's from Hay House, so it's that kind of typical papery Hay House cardstock. I really appreciate the artwork as well, and I know that the author is the same author of a Runes deck as well, but I don't necessarily remember the name. But I wish there were an even bigger oracle deck, you know, very similar if possible to the artwork of this, just to be able to integrate it. I think it would be so much fun. So another tarot deck that I got in April is the New Moon Tarot. I think I've talked about this tarot before in a couple of videos. It's a really beautiful deck. So this one, the author is Canadian. It's a bit of a glossy cardstock, but not too bad. The artwork is very minimalist, and the color palette is very limited as well. I think the combination of black and yellow and this kind of cream color is very good. I really like the pips in this deck. They're actually very good. I think I remember I talked about this card because I was talking about the fact that the suit of wands is represented by crystal wands, which is, you know, on the one hand is kind of obvious because of the name wands, but on the other hand, for me, crystals are rocks, therefore they have this really strong earthy kind of energy and elemental energy. So in many other decks, for example, we see crystals representing the suit of earth, so pentacles. But pentacles is actual pentacles, you know, encased in butterflies, which is very beautiful. So as I said, it's a very minimalist kind of deck, and it's a very witchy kind of deck too. It really does give you that idea of reconnecting with something very deep in our intuition, in our own selves. The suit of swords is, well, is represented by snakes. And as I said, the suit of pentacles is represented by butterflies, and the cups are cups or mugs. So I haven't used this deck as much as I wanted to. When I saw it, I actually think I bought this deck because of this card, because I really enjoy this card. I really like it. And as a matter of fact, because of this card, I thought it would have been really cool to pair it up with the Crystal Ball Oracle. And just to give you perhaps an idea, I'm just gonna do it now. Let's see what happens. So we've got the tarot, the new moon tarot on the sides, and then we're just gonna grab again the crystal ball pocket oracle and see what happens, because I haven't had the time to try this yet, but it could be interesting. Okay, cool. The time is right between the Queen of Pentacles and the Magician. I mean, obviously, it's a very small deck. The Oracle deck is a very small deck, 13 cards. So can't really go on for long when you're trying to pair them up. But I do believe that it works. It's got that kind of, as I said, this witchy kind of intuition that brings about a kind of an introspective kind of reading, and it does pair up with a very direct kind of oracle. Sometimes it's very nice to pair up an intuitive deck, so a peepish deck like this one, to a very straightforward kind of oracle. And artwork wise, I think that it pairs up really well as well. I don't know what you think. I think this deck, it's a very reasonable price, as I said, and it's available on Amazon, and I think I've seen a lot of people using it. I was just wondering, how do you use it? Do you use it like you would use an 8-ball? Like you ask a question, or perhaps a pendulum, you know, you just ask a question and you pick a card and that's your answer to the question. Or do you pair it up like I'm doing right now? Be really interesting to know. But anyway, so this is the New Moon Tarot. This is a really beautiful oracle deck that I got in this month. It's the Fons Maria Mucha oracle cards. So this deck, it's a bit of a hit and miss for me. I think I've talked about this deck before. It's absolutely glorious. The artwork is fantastic. I do appreciate Mucha or Mucha artwork a lot. I do not have yet the tarot by the same author. It's curated art, obviously, because I actually prefer the oracle, and I wanted to get to know you know, the divination tools with the curated art from this painter through the oracle first. I know that he was actually into the occult. He was really into tarot as well, and I was really curious to see, because a tarot, the production of a tarot follows a certain system, well, as it does as we've seen before with the Lorenzi, but generally speaking, you do have some things that, you know, the structure, for example, 78 cards, 56 minors, 22 majors, etc. But I want to see what they would have done when it comes to the oracle. And I am blown away by the beauty of these cards. They're incredible. There's just not many other words that I can use to describe it, because it is just mind-blowing how beautiful they are. Even though they have this kind of structure in which you have the same kind of really thick borders on the sides and the figure in the center, and just a number, and this is one of the reasons why, and I said at the beginning, it's a bit of a hit and miss for me, because it does not have keywords, which means that every time you pull a card, unless you've been using this deck for many times, you would have to go back to the guidebook. It doesn't tell you much. The images will be very beautiful, do not necessarily convey a kind of a message nor keyword necessarily. They are kind of easy to remember once you do get to know the guidebook, but it does require you to be reading it. And that's the main reason why I'm, on the one hand, I'm like, I'm definitely gonna keep this oracle. On the other hand, I'm like, yes, but if it had keywords, it would have been so much better. I would have made such a good use of this deck, I'm sure, 100%. It actually pairs well with a lot of tarot decks that I've got, a lot of recent tarot decks that I've got in my collection, like the Jonasa Jaus 5. And it's really a pity to see that I can't really use it as much as I would like to because of the lack of keywords. And just to show you, I've got the Jonasa Jaus 5 here, and a quick shuffle. I just wanted to show you how well these two pair together. It's really a match made in heaven, and it's just not just because of the color palette being very similar. It's actually the combination of the colors and the artwork. There you go. So obviously, if you know the Jonasa, the JJ5, like I call it, it's got a very green kind of tint to it, which reminds a lot and creates a lot of echoes and resonances with the teal green and the blue and the light green of the oracle. Obviously, I can't give you an actual reading like I always do when I do some pairings, because there are no keywords on the oracle. But I just wanted to show you how beautiful these two are together. And possibly, I know that it's very difficult when this by the way has been published by Los Carabel. I don't think that they'll republish with keywords. It's something that is not necessarily something that they do. I have seen very rarely Los Carabel republishing oracle decks, you know, in a different way. I really do wish they did though, because it would be fantastic. And I posted this on Instagram, and I received a lot of comments from people saying, why don't you just write yourself the titles on the cards, and I have done that with other decks, for example the Sacred Hags Oracle, but I just don't feel like ruin the artwork, because my handwriting is terrible, so I would definitely ruin it, definitely. And some other people actually suggested, you know, using washi tape and writing the title on the washi tape, and just to the point in which I actually memorize it, and then removing it, because washi tape would not damage the card. And that's something that I'm actually considering doing, because it's just so beautiful. These two are really, really beautiful together. There's so much in common, not just when it comes to the color palette, but also with the artwork. So this is the Alphonse Maria Mucha Oracle card, and it's paired up with the Jonasa Jaus 5th edition. So talking about Jonasa, I think I was one of the very first person to place the order back in, I don't even remember, I think it was in January this year, but I'm not sure 100%, but when I heard that that she had published the 7th edition of the Jonasa Jaus and the 4th edition of the Stunning, I just immediately logged into her page and I placed the order, and I'm really happy that I did, because these two decks are absolutely gorgeous. As a matter of fact, when I got this one, I immediately posted an ISO in search of on one of the Facebook groups, asking for someone who wanted to sell me the 5th edition, because I'm just absolutely in love with this deck. I cannot say the same with the Stunning Tarot, and it's just a matter of I don't know, it's a personal taste. I know that there's a lot of people yelling at me right now, what are you talking about, it's stunning. Yes, it's called Stunning. I get that. But let's talk about the JJ, my JJ7. This deck is so beautiful. Every time I use it, I just, you know, sometimes I actually feel like I should focus on the cards more, because every time I use it, I just look at the cards and I just lost in how much I love the combination of colors, the artwork. Jonasa sent out the link, I think, to, or maybe the QR code, I don't remember, to the PDF file of the guidebook for both of them. And I haven't had the time to go through that yet, but I know that there's the association between the flowers and the plants and the tarot card, and I just can't wait to have a look at it. I love this deck so much that I just, well, first of all, as I said, I went straight looking for the 5th edition. I'm still looking for the jumbo edition at a reasonable price because I've been quoted to 150 to 130 US, which is, to me, is just out of my price range. And look at this Hermit card, it's just absolutely gorgeous. I love everything about it. And I had this feeling when I was looking at it, I had this feeling that it would have been pairing really well with the Universal Folk Oracle. So what I did, I actually got that oracle, and I'm going to show you how well they pair up together. It's just a match made in heaven. So this month I got this one as well, the Universal Folk Oracle. This is published by US Game. And I have to say, it's a very good publication. I really like the quality. I love the back of the cards. And I think that they're really getting, their act together at US Games when it comes to new decks, new productions. So this oracle is very beautiful for many, many reasons. One of the things that I also talk about it when in one of the videos, in one of my latest videos, I actually compare the production of US Games decks versus Los Scarabeo decks throughout 4 decades, so in the last 40 years, showing decks that, that belong to those decades. So from the 80s, 90s, the 90s, and the 10s. And I actually have a few decks from, 2023 as well. Which I think is rather important to have a look at the latest productions as well, because I do believe that in the last couple of years there has been a bit of a turning point in both companies. First, probably US Games decided to revert to a kind of high quality, and Los Scarabeo felt like they had to step up as well, because otherwise obviously they just lose market to each other. But look at this match made in heaven. It is absolutely spectacular. I really love the way these two talk together, the way the colors have their own communication, that they have their own conversation, between the cards. There's so much that I really love. I was saying about this oracle. Whether you like the artwork or not, what I do appreciate is, as I said, the cardstock, which is really good, but also the fact that we've got let's say a main keyword, like in this case is expansion, and then you have 4 minor keywords: ritual, dance, feast, and fire. Obviously you may decide to stay with the main keywords, or if that doesn't resonate with you, then you can have a look at the minor keywords. And that's excellent. That's an excellent way to produce a deck, especially when it comes to oracle decks. You can have a tarot deck with no keywords, no titles at all. Tira May has released a really, really beautiful collage tarot deck, which is called the Ritual Tarot. And there's no titles, no numbers, no keywords, nothing on the cards. But because when you buy tarot like that, you have to know your system, obviously. And you can still read it. You can still read it because the images are very evocative. The symbols in the images are evocative of the card that they're representing. But we don't have that in an oracle. So an oracle like the Mucha oracle that only has the image, unfortunately, it doesn't work that well. And I wish, I was talking about the fact that perhaps because of the really great changes that we've seen lately in the production of oracle and tarot in these 2 companies, perhaps that means that they hired a tarot reader as a consultant. And I was making a joke, but then I got a few commenting that they actually believe it to be true, that there's a lot of communication going on between a publishing company nowadays and tarot creators and tarot readers and collectors. I wish they did the same at Los Scarabeo, because we have these decks with only 32 cards, priced at a premium, and with no keywords and other things that are not necessarily making us happy. But in this case, I really enjoy pairing these two together. They are really made for each other. I just can't get over how beautiful these two are. So this is the Universal Folk Oracle, and I've been pairing it with my JJ7. And now let's have a look at the Stunning Tarot, which is, I feel like I need to specify this. This tarot deck and I do not die, but only because I probably haven't dedicated enough time to get to know this. The artwork is spectacular. I used to have the 3rd edition, which had a terrible cardstock. I remember holding it with only one hand and moving my hand, and the deck would wobble. However, I did prefer the card size. It was more traditional and it was easier for me to handle. There are a few changes between editions. This is the 4th edition. I still really love and enjoy recognizing Jonasa's artwork and her style, which is impeccable, absolutely gorgeous. And as I said, I just, perhaps it's a combination of the colors that it's just not my particular vibe. I don't know yet. It's just a gut feeling. But this deck is, I know that it's a glorious deck. I know that there's a lot of people, you know, really enjoying it, and I'm jealous because I would love to have the same kind of passion that I've seen by a lot of collectors about this deck, and perhaps it will come one day. So I keep my mind open, and I will definitely dedicate some times to get to know it, and I will not make any kind of decision whether I want it to stay in my collection or not until I'm sure 100% that whatever my decision is a very well informed decision. I really like the artwork. That is never a problem with these decks. I enjoy the artwork very, very much. So this is the Stunning Tarot, the 4th edition. So I'm just gonna pick up the pace because there's still so much to talk about. I did warn you that it was going to, or did I warn you? I don't remember if I warned you, but it's gonna be a long video. So this month I also received the Tarot Tales. This is because I'm kind of focusing on a project on fairy tales for the month of May, but also because when I had a look at this deck, I saw a walkthrough and I really enjoyed it. I have a passion for fairy tales. It's been like that all of my life. I remember when I was little, the only good memories that I had about my mom and my dad was of them telling me stories to make me sleep, to make me go to bed, and I actually cherished those moments because there were not many of them. And I also remember reading all of the fairy tales that I could find. I remember writing fairy tales on my own, doing a lot of research in later years about very typical fairy tales that belong to very specific areas of Italy. For example, there's the Dolomites in the north. There's some areas that have very specific fairy tales, and many of them are really scary. So I actually do prefer the darker kind of fairy tales. And I just absolutely love how this deck has got a different fairy tale for each and every card, and it comes with a really nice book, a hardcover book, and you can actually read about them in the same way that, for example, if you're familiar with the Ghosts and Spirits Tarot by Lisa Hunt, for example, or the Fairy Tale Tarot by Lisa Hunt as well. Well, the Fairy Tale Tarot even more so, it comes with a very thick guidebook. I have the Spanish edition, which is not a problem, but I heard that US Games is actually going to republish the Fairy Tale Tarot by Lisa Hunt by probably the end of this year, although I'm not entirely sure. And I do recommend it because it's getting to know fairy tales is the same way in which we can actually reconnect with the roots of our ancestors, to me. I mean, knowing that some of these fairy tales or some of the fairy tales in other decks as ancient as we can know, as we have anything written, from that specific country is actually fascinating, which means that children were told those very same fairy tales we can actually read right now. And that's a wonderful way to look at it, because fairy tales always express, sometimes they express deep fears seated in our soul, something that we are not sure, something that we do not necessarily know. So we create our own explanation on how, on trying to decipher what the world represents for us, and what some phenomena, natural phenomena for example, represent for us. But also in many cases there's an attempt at explaining human feelings. Love is one of the main drives in fairy tales. There's always someone ready to sacrifice themselves for someone they love, and it's something that is so modern that we can think that we evolve, and we certainly do, because we have technology around us and everything, but at the end of the day, what drives human beings is always the same. So we are driven by emotions: love, fear, anger. And it's fascinating to me to see how these emotions were described. They took the semblance of a fairy tale that was told to children before they went to bed. So this is the Tarot of Tales. Okay, then thanks to a very generous person in one of my Facebook groups, I can actually get access to the indie edition of the Animal King Oracle cards for a very reasonable price. I love this deck. I, on the other hand, can't stand the borders on the mass market edition. So I tried everything with the mass market edition. I tried trimming the borders, but I didn't like the cards because they became really tiny. When I saw this indie edition, I really wanted it. It's beautiful, it's the perfect size for me, it's also the perfect shape, the colors are amazing. It still has those borders, which, in this card, in the economy, in the real estate of the card, they're actually quite good. They're not like massive. It's the perfect oracle deck. It's got the animal, it's got the title, telling you that this is a frog, but because we kind of know that this is a frog, is actually telling us with the keyword what the frog is referring to, which is something that I appreciate. So thank you for that. Beautiful cardstock. I really love this deck, and it's so versatile. I can actually pair it up with any kind of animal or nature themed tarot deck that I've got. The colors also make it so that it can pair up with colorful tarot decks, or also with black and white tarot decks. It's beautiful. I'm really happy that I was so lucky to find this deck in an indie edition, which is so much better than to me, it's so much better than the mass market. I know that there's a lot of people loving the borders of this deck in the mass market edition. It just wasn't for me. So I'm very happy that I found this one. This month I also got the Shamanic Healing Oracle cards by Michelle A. Matzvas. This deck is beautiful. The artwork is very particular, I must say. I actually got it because I saw it on Instagram, and I thought that it was going to pair up really well with the Jonasa, the 7th edition of the Jonasa Jels. I ended up actually trying that pairing and not necessarily liking it, even though in some cases I do recognize that the colors do recall each other, but not all of the cards. And what happens is that I do believe that this deck is so strong that it's actually a lot better when used not paired up with the tarot. So if you use it as a wrap-up message, for example, after a complex reading, I use it, whenever I read with it, just with one card or maybe perhaps 2 cards from this deck on their own, but not pair up with a tarot. And I'm actually quite curious, if you do own this deck, let me know how you use it. It's very interesting. It does have that kind of healing properties, in specific referring to the shamanic, the shamanism. and I really do love the artwork. I think it's absolutely superb. But in some cases, so the disconnect came from the fact that I did buy it, you know, to a specific purpose of pairing it up, and then I ended up not liking the pairing, and just trying now to find different ways to use it. So I'm very curious to hear from you if you have this deck and how you use it. And we're almost through, and I'm quite happy because truth be told, it's Mercury retrograde and I'm having so many problems with technology, it's not even funny. I mean, this is the 5th time in which I try to recharge the iPad. So I'm using the iPhone and the iPad to see what I'm filming. And for some reason, even though the iPad is charged and it should be recharging, it has decided not to. So it's one of those things. Yesterday my printer broke down. It never happened before. I had this chunk of paper stuck at the back. I didn't even know that I could open the back of the printer. There was this tape on it, so I had to remove the tape. So it shows that I never had to do it because the tape was original. Welcome to Mercury retrograde, ladies and gentlemen. So the Essential Oils Healing Deck. This comes from a need that I felt to just try and get to know the healing properties of essential oils. But I've talked about this deck a couple of times in my videos before. It's a beautiful deck. The artwork is spectacular. I love the colors and I love the structure, the way in which the cards are structured with, you know, the English name, the Latin name of the specific plant. And then, you know, it tells you a little bit about the healing properties of the specific plant. So turmeric, for example, rebuilds body, mind, and spirit. And then it also shows you with the icons, it shows you the ways in which you can use it. So with a diffuser, but you can also use it in your massage routine and also as a supplement. The guidebook is really interesting as well. Let's say that it's expanding on whatever is already written on the cards. I really love this deck. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a 52 cards deck, so it's a chunky one. You know, 52 different essential oils that you can use to try and feel better. And so we're going towards winter in the southern hemisphere, and it's the time of the year in which I actually feel like I want to be nourishing my body and my soul at the same time, and trying and find the way in different ways every time. And I think that you know, essential oils are right there, they're available. You just need to gather the knowledge in order to use them. But this deck is really, really good for this purpose. And the last tarot deck that I received just the other day is this beauty that we've got here, the Blue Earth Tarot by Alison Davis. This deck, it was almost a bit of a chance kind of buying for me, because I had only had a glimpse at a few of the cards. I saw it in an Instagram account that I followed, then I track back the author, Alison's Instagram page. I had a look at more of her heart and I just fell in love. I absolutely fell in love with it. I love the theme of this deck. It's blue earth, and for many different reasons, April for me was a blue month, not necessarily because of melancholy, you know, in the traditional use of the word blue or feeling blue, but because blue to me reconnects me to two main elements, the element of water and the element of air, which are predominant. Air is predominant in my birth chart. But I am a water person because, you know, variety and contradiction actually make life more interesting. And I live next to the water. So for me, it was a matter of reconnecting with something that I call the blue planet. And blue planet for me is extremely important. It's the sense of being part of something bigger than myself. A conscious community that live and breathe in nature and in this meaningful connection with these elements of air and water. I am a water person because I can actually feel how healing the power of water, in specific of ocean water or sea water, is from myself, and this deck is expressing just that, and I absolutely love it. And that's also the last deck that I wanted to show you, not just because it was the last deck that came to my collection a couple of days ago, but also because the blue planet, the concept of blue planet has been very important to me throughout the whole month of April, as I mentioned before. And therefore, when it comes to the choice of pen and ink from this month, let me get the deck out of the way. So this month I have chosen the Montblanc Blue Hour fountain pen. This is an incredibly beautiful fountain pen that I don't use very often because it's very heavy, metal heavy. Now, if you know, I never post my, especially not an expensive one, but I used to, probably when I was 12, I used to post, if you're not familiar, is when you actually put the cap on top of the pen. I never do that because I simply don't want to ruin the fountain pen, although I did used to do that all the time. But even not posted, this pen is quite heavy, and what happens is that I'm someone who writes, well, every day for hours, whether it's for work, whether it's for because I'm actually writing books, whether it's for, you know, writing in my journal, writing in my diary. I write all the time. And when it's a heavy pen like this, I actually start feeling the strain on my fingers and my wrist, etc. So this is not a pen, unfortunately, that I use a lot, but because of the theme of the month, so the blue earth, the blue planet, the blue hour was the perfect way to just stay in the theme of the month. And the blue hour, for those who are not familiar with this term, is just after sunset. So it's the time in which it feels like everything stands still because nature feels like it's going through the normal cycle of the day, shifting towards nighttime. And it's a very beautiful hour. And if you live by the ocean or by any body of water, you will notice that it's not just called blue hours for nothing. It's actually, everything takes on a little bit of a blue kind of tint. So it's really, really magic. It's a magic time of the day. So this is the pen that I use. This is the ink that I used, mainly also from Montblanc, and it's called Star Walker Blue Planet. It's not necessarily associated with the pen, so the pen is called Blue Hour, and it does have a specific ink in the portfolio, ink portfolio of Montblanc. But the Star Walker is a different kind of fountain pen, but I just loved the name Blue Planet, and I really, really wanted to try it out. And this is the swatch, as you can see. So what I normally do, this is just one pass, this is 2 passes of the ink. And I have to say that when you have a medium nib, and I keep on saying this whenever I show fountain pens and inks, if you're not interested, I completely understand. It's a very geeky thing that I have. So skip ahead, it's fine. But when you have this kind of ink, which is, you know, the first pass is very light, it's actually interesting to use a slightly wider kind of nib, like for example, not a fine, but a medium or even a broad kind of nib, even though it's not very common to find a broad nib from Montblanc. I don't have any. I do have a lot of fountain pens with a broad nib or even a double broad nib, and this ink looks really beautiful because it looks like a mix between this pass and one pass and 2 passes. But it's a very beautiful kind of shade of blue, which is actually very similar, if you look at it, to the Blue Earth Tarot. And I just find it exceptionally beautiful. This month I also played Detroit Become Human. This is an older game from Quantic Dream, and the reason why I played it was, well, first of all, because it was the first time when it came out. I think it was 2017 or 2018, more likely. I had heard of it, but back then I only had an Xbox, and this is just being released for for PlayStations. But then I got a PlayStation, and I think I started playing When Dusk Falls, which is a choice-driven game, it tends to be one of my favorite type of games. I was talking about it with someone, and they said to me, if you like that game, you should really try Detroit, because it's one of those games in which the choices you make actually do have consequences. So what happens is that there's so much that goes into production of these kind of games, that whatever you choose is extremely important and does have different outcomes. And as a matter of fact, there are so many different outcomes that at the end of the game you can literally go back and pick a chapter and just maybe choose a different sentence to say, choose a different outcome, and you'll have a completely different ending. I kid you not, it's something that goes from complete peace to a nuclear kind of ending. So it's very, very interesting, and I really, really loved playing it. And also when it comes to, you know, stuff that I've done for entertaining, I kept on buying books by Murakami. I remember when I read it the first time, but it was many years ago. I just love Murakami. Is one of my favorite authors, and the way in which he writes, I think I've said this before, I was lucky enough to be able to assist to a few lessons of one of the world's most famous expert on Murakami's books, and she's a professor here in Sydney, Rebecca Suto. She's Italian as well. And she talks about the fact that Murakami has been a bit of a bridge between the two worlds, so the Japanese kind of literature and the American literature, because he actually wrote many of his books, the most famous ones at least, whilst he was a lecturer in New Jersey in a US university. And he was obviously very taken in by the American culture, and what he did was a bit of an experiment in which he was trying to write something based in Japan, so a novel based in Japan with Japanese themes and obviously everything else related to the Japanese culture, with a lot of references, for example, to more American culture, or a culture, or pop culture, references to pop culture that would have been understandable and easy to enjoy if read by an American. And therefore in his books we have a lot of references when it comes to food. For example, he's always cooking European food. He's always cooking spaghetti, for example. When he listens to music, is jazz, American jazz. So there's a lot of these elements that you can find that in a way made it easier for the Western culture to actually enjoy Murakami's books. And thanks to that, there was also a kind of a progress towards the Japanese culture in general. So Rebecca Suter's thesis is, and concept is, that thanks to Murakami, there's a lot of us that actually love Japanese literature, even though after Murakami it becomes a literature that is most specifically based on more Japanese kind of culture. I don't know if it makes sense, but in any case, it's something that is extremely interesting for me. And other than that, if you are not interested in that, I do believe that these books are amazing. Kafka, The Shore, The Wind Up Wyrd Chronicle, all of those books are wonderful to me, and I don't mind reading them and rereading them. And as a matter of fact, I think this is my 5th edition of this book. I don't mind buying different editions, because it feels like when I read a new edition, it feels like it's a new book. So this has been my reading, among others, in the month of April. And this is it. So thank you so much for staying with me till the end of this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me. And also, I really do enjoy it when I read your comments and responding to your comments. It really establishes that kind of meaningful connection with the tarot community that I sought, that I was after since the beginning of my channel. So thank you so much. More to come. Have a great day.